I went to the hospital to meet my daughter's newborn baby. The receptionist stopped me. Amy's mother is already in the maternity ward. I insisted. I am her mother. She shook her head. She has been here for hours. I pretended to leave but waited in the parking lot, and what I saw made me tremble. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Hospital hummed overhead as I pushed through the revolving doors, my heart racing with the kind of joy only a grandmother can understand. Amy had called me at dawn, her voice exhausted but triumphant. A boy. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Perfect in every way. I clutched the small teddy bear I'd bought weeks ago, its blue ribbon crisp between my fingers. At 63, I'd learned to treasure these moments. Life had taught me that happiness arrives in small packages, often when you least expect it, and sometimes when you need it most. The reception desk sat like a fortress in the hospital's main lobby, manned by a young woman with severe glasses and an expression that suggested she'd forgotten how to smile sometime around her third double shift. I approached with the eager energy of someone about to meet their first grandchild. "Good morning," I said, unable to keep the tremor of excitement from my voice. "I'm here to see Amy Granger, maternity ward. She just had a baby boy this morning." The receptionist's fingers clattered across her keyboard, her eyes scanning the screen with bureaucratic precision. Then she looked up at me, and something in her expression made my stomach tighten. "Amy Granger's mother is already in the maternity ward," she said flatly, as though reading from a script. I laughed. A nervous, confused sound. "I'm sorry, what?" "Her mother arrived hours ago. She's been with her since the delivery." The teddy bear's ribbon suddenly felt too tight in my grip. There must be some mistake. I am her mother, Hannah Granger. I'm Amy's mother. The receptionist's expression didn't change. She glanced at her screen again, then back at me with the patient condescension of someone explaining something obvious to someone slow. "Ma'am, I'm looking at our visitor log right now. Mrs. Roberta Granger signed in at 6:47 this morning. She listed herself as the patient's mother. She's currently in room 3I-12. Roberta Granger." The name landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of confusion through my mind. Roberta Granger was my former sister-in-law, my late husband David's sister. She hasn't used the Granger surname since she married and became Roberta Albright decades ago. "That's impossible," I said, my voice firmer now. "Roberta is Amy's aunt, not her mother. There's been a mistake in your system." The receptionist's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Ma'am, I can only go by what's in our records." The woman who signed in showed identification and knew the patient's full name, date of birth, and medical information. Security protocols are very strict in the maternity ward. "Then your protocols have a flaw," I said, trying to keep my tone measured despite the alarm bells beginning to ring in my head. "Because I gave birth to Amy Elizabeth Granger 32 years ago in this very hospital. I should know. I was there." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across the receptionist's face. She glanced at her screen again, then reached for her phone. "Let me call up to the ward and clarify." "No." The word came out sharper than I intended. Something wasn't right. Roberta hadn't spoken to Amy in over a year, not since the ugly argument at David's funeral about the estate. She'd accused me of manipulating David in his final days, of convincing him to leave the family farm to Amy, instead of dividing it between all his nieces and nephews. The words she'd hurled at me that day still stung. Gold digger, manipulator, thief. And now she was in my daughter's hospital room, claiming to be her mother? "Ma'am?" The receptionist was staring at me, phone in hand. I forced a smile. "You know what? I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. I'll come back later when things are less busy. Thank you for your help." I turned and walked away before she could respond, my mind racing. Every instinct I'd honed over 6 decades screamed that something was deeply, dangerously wrong. Roberta wasn't the type to show up out of nowhere, especially not to a hospital where she had no business being. And why would she identify herself as Amy's mother? The parking lot was half empty in the early morning light. I found my car, a sensible sedan that David used to joke was older than most of the students at the community college, and climbed inside. But I didn't start the engine. Instead, I adjusted my rearview mirror to get a clear view of the hospital's main entrance. David used to laugh at what he called my detective habits. I'd always been observant, careful, the kind of person who noticed when things didn't add up. It had served me well during our 35 years of marriage, helping me manage the farm's accounts, catch errors before they became disasters, spot the early signs of David's illness before even he recognized them. Now, sitting in my car with a teddy bear in my lap and dread coiling in my chest, I was grateful for those instincts. 20 minutes passed, then 40. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the interior of my car. I was about to question my decision to wait when I saw her. Roberta emerged from the hospital's side entrance, the one that connected to the maternity ward's private exit. She was dressed in expensive clothes, her hair perfectly styled despite the early hour, and in her arms, wrapped in a blue hospital blanket, was a baby, my grandson. I sat frozen, my breath caught in my throat. Roberta moved quickly, her eyes scanning the parking lot with the nervous energy of someone doing something they shouldn't. She wasn't walking toward the main parking area. She was heading toward a black SUV parked in the far corner, away from the security cameras I could see mounted on the building. This wasn't a grandmother wanting to help with the baby. This was something else entirely. My hands fumbled for my phone. I should call the police. I should call Amy. But Roberta was already at the SUV, already opening the back door, already placing my grandson into a car seat that had clearly been prepared in advance. The whole scene was choreographed, planned. I started my engine, my heart hammering against my ribs. 32 years ago, when Amy was born, I'd promised her that I would always protect her. That promise extended to her children, to this tiny life that had entered the world only hours ago. Roberta's SUV pulled out of its space, heading toward the parking lot exit. I followed. It wasn't until I was 3 cars behind her, merging onto the highway, that the full weight of what I was doing hit me. I was pursuing my sister-in-law who had somehow managed to walk out of a hospital with my newborn grandson. I had no idea where she was taking him, why she'd done it, or what she planned to do next. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a confused grandmother making an innocent mistake. This was a theft. And the worst part, the detail that made my blood run cold as I kept Roberta's SUV in sight, was that she'd planned it. She'd used the Granger name deliberately. She'd known Amy's information. She'd had a car seat ready. This wasn't spontaneous. This was premeditated. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. Amy's name flashed on the screen. I couldn't answer. Not while driving. Not while following Roberta. And certainly not before I understood what was happening. My daughter had just given birth. She was vulnerable, exhausted, trusting. If I called her now and told her that her baby was missing, that her aunt had somehow taken him, no. I needed answers first. I needed to understand the scope of this nightmare before I pulled Amy into it. Roberta's SUV took an exit I knew well. We were heading toward Riverside County, toward the rural areas where property was cheap and questions were scarce, toward the kind of places where someone could disappear if they wanted to. My phone buzzed again, then again. Amy was probably wondering where I was, why I hadn't arrived yet. I kept driving, keeping Roberta's vehicle in sight, my mind spinning through possibilities and scenarios, each one darker than the last. In the passenger seat, the teddy bear with its blue ribbon seemed to watch me with black plastic eyes, a silent witness to a grandmother's desperate pursuit. Whatever Roberta was planning, whatever scheme she'd concocted, she'd made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated me. The highway stretched before me like a gray ribbon, each mile marker ticking past as I maintained my distance behind Roberta's SUV. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, my mind racing faster than the engine. Think, Hannah, think. Roberta had clearly planned this, but why? What could she possibly gain from taking Amy's baby? The question gnawed at me as we passed the Riverside exit and continued into increasingly rural territory. My phone continued its insistent buzzing. Amy calling, then texting, her worry transmitted through digital pulses that I couldn't answer. Not yet. Not until I knew more. Roberta's SUV finally slowed, turning onto a narrow county road I recognized. Willow Creek Road. My chest tightened. This road led to only one place worth noting: the old Granger property. The farm that had caused so much family strife, the 200 acres that David had inherited from his father, and eventually left to Amy in his will. The farm that Roberta had insisted should have been divided among all of David's relatives. The SUV disappeared around a bend flanked by oak trees. I slowed, giving her more distance. If she spotted me now, whatever advantage I had would vanish. The road narrowed further, becoming the gravel drive I'd traveled countless times during my marriage. The farmhouse appeared through the trees, a 2-story colonial that had housed 4 generations of Grangers, its white paint now peeling, its wraparound porch sagging slightly. Roberta's SUV pulled up to the front entrance. I stopped my car behind a cluster of trees about 100 yards back, partially hidden from view. Through the branches, I watched her emerge from the vehicle, moving quickly to retrieve the baby from the back seat. She wasn't alone. A man stepped out of the farmhouse, tall, well-dressed, carrying a leather briefcase. Even from this distance, I recognized the purposeful stride of someone accustomed to authority. They spoke briefly, Roberta gesturing with her free hand while cradling my grandson in the other. Then they both disappeared inside. My phone rang again. This time it wasn't Amy. The screen displayed Bradley Granger, my stepson, David's son from his first marriage. Bradley and I had maintained a cordial relationship over the years, though he'd sided with Roberta during the estate dispute. He'd felt entitled to a portion of the farm, despite David's clear wishes. I answered, keeping my voice steady. "Bradley. Hannah." His tone was clipped, businesslike. "Where are you? Amy's been calling everyone. She's hysterical. She says the baby is missing from the nursery." So it had been discovered. The clock was now ticking. "What do you mean, missing?" I kept my eyes on the farmhouse. "Exactly what I said. The nurses did their rounds and the baby wasn't in his bassinet. Security is reviewing footage. Amy claims you never showed up at the hospital and now she can't reach you. What's going on?" I made a split-second decision. "Bradley, I need you to do something for me. Don't ask questions yet. Just listen. Go to Amy. Tell her the baby is safe. Tell her I'm handling it." Silence on the other end. Then, "Hannah, what have you done?" "I haven't done anything. But I know who has. I need you to trust me for the next few hours. Keep Amy calm. Keep the police from issuing any alerts yet. Can you do that?" "You're not making sense. If you know where the baby is—" "Bradley," I interrupted him, my voice firm. "Your father trusted me with his legacy. I'm asking you to trust me now. Give me until noon. If I haven't resolved this by then, call whoever you want. But right now, involving the police will make this situation much worse." Another pause. I could almost hear him calculating, weighing options. Bradley was an attorney, careful, methodical. This better not be some scheme to make Roberta look bad. "The estate settlement is final, Hannah. The farm is Amy's. There's nothing to contest." "This isn't about the estate," I said, though I was beginning to suspect it absolutely was. "Please, Bradley, trust me." He hung up without agreeing, which I took as the best I could hope for. I had maybe 2 hours before he decided to act on his own. I stepped out of my car, careful to close the door quietly. The morning air was cool, carrying the scent of wildflowers and freshly turned earth. The farm looked abandoned. No vehicles besides Roberta's SUV. No signs of the workers Amy had hired to maintain the property while she prepared to move in. Moving carefully through the tree line, I approached the farmhouse from the side, staying low and out of sight from the windows. My heart hammered in my chest. At 63, I wasn't accustomed to skulking through bushes like some television detective, but desperation made me creative. Voices drifted through an open window on the first floor. David's old study. I crouched beneath the sill, my knees protesting the position, and listened. "Assured me the documentation is airtight." That was Roberta's voice, sharp and confident. "Amy signed the power of attorney when she was admitted. She was in labor, distracted. She barely read it. Power of attorney doesn't give you custody rights." The man's voice, the one with the briefcase, was measured, Professional. A lawyer, certainly. What you're describing is kidnapping, Mrs. Albright. I agreed to help you contest the estate, not participate in— Don't be dramatic, Richard. He's my grandnephew. Family. I'm protecting him from a mother who's clearly unstable. You saw the psychiatric evaluation I showed you. My blood ran cold. Psychiatric evaluation? Amy had never had any psychiatric treatment. She was one of the most stable, capable people I knew. That report is from a Dr. Harrison Stemple. The lawyer, Richard, said slowly. I've never heard of him. Is he licensed in this state? He's perfectly legitimate. He evaluated Amy last month after her episode. What episode? The one where she threatened to harm herself and the baby. I have witnesses. Her husband, Kenneth, will testify to her instability. Once we present this to family court, along with the power of attorney, we'll establish that Amy is unfit. Temporary custody will be granted to the nearest capable family member. Me. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. This was insane. Amy had never threatened anyone, least of all herself or her unborn child. Kenneth, her husband, adored her. He would never testify to something so monstrously false. Unless— Where is Kenneth now? Richard asked, echoing my thoughts. Business trip, Singapore. He'll be there for another week. By the time he returns, everything will be arranged. Amy will be in a facility getting the help she needs, and I'll have legal custody of the child. Once that's established, we can address the real issue. The farm. The farm, Roberta confirmed. David was manipulated in his final days. Hannah convinced him to leave everything to Amy, cutting out the rest of the family. It was elder abuse, pure and simple. But Amy is young, overwhelmed, a new mother with mental health issues. She'll need family support. Someone to help manage the property. Someone to make decisions on her behalf while she recovers. Someone like you. I'm only thinking of what's best for everyone. The cynicism in Richard's voice was palpable. And if the farm happens to get sold during this time? If the proceeds happen to get distributed among David's other relatives as you've been advocating for 2 years? Then justice will have been served. I'd heard enough. My mind reeled from the scope of Roberta's scheme. She'd forged a psychiatric report. She'd tricked Amy into signing something during labor. She'd taken the baby not out of concern, but as leverage. A way to have Amy declared unfit so Roberta could seize control of the estate. The sheer calculated cruelty of it made me nauseous. I backed away from the window, my mind racing through options. I could call the police now, but what would I tell them? That I'd followed someone to a property that legally belonged to my daughter, where my sister-in-law was holding my grandson. Roberta had documents, false ones, but documents nonetheless. She had a lawyer with her, giving her actions a veneer of legitimacy. By the time I convinced anyone that this was kidnapping, not a family matter, Roberta would have her narrative established. Amy would be painted as unstable. I would be painted as interfering. And that baby, my innocent grandson, would become a pawn in a legal battle that could drag on for months. No, I needed leverage. I needed proof of Roberta's real intentions, something so damning she couldn't talk her way around it. My phone buzzed with a text from Bradley. Amy sedated. Hospital security called police. Amber alert pending. You have 1 hour, Hannah. Then I'm telling them everything. 1 hour. I looked back at the farmhouse, at the window where Roberta's voice still drifted out, spinning her web of lies. Inside that house was my grandson, held by a woman who saw him not as a child, but as a tool. The front door of the farmhouse opened. Richard emerged, briefcase in hand, looking troubled. He walked quickly to a silver sedan parked beside Roberta's SUV and drove away, gravel crunching under his tires. That meant Roberta was alone now, alone with the baby. I'd spent 63 years being careful, reasonable, playing by the rules. I'd been the dutiful wife, the supportive mother, the peacemaker in family disputes. But watching Roberta's scheme unfold, understanding the depth of her manipulation, something crystallized inside me. Sometimes, the rules don't protect the innocent. Sometimes, wisdom means knowing when to break them. I walked toward the farmhouse, no longer hiding, my spine straight and my purpose clear. Roberta Albright had made the mistake of thinking that kindness meant weakness, that age meant fragility. She was about to learn otherwise. As I climbed the porch steps, the same steps where David and I had shared morning coffee for decades, I heard the baby crying inside. My grandson's wail cut through the morning air, primal and afraid. I tried the door. Locked. But I'd lived in this house for 35 years. I knew every entrance, every window, every vulnerability. Roberta had chosen the wrong battleground. The kitchen window on the east side had never latched properly. David had promised to fix it for years, but we'd always found other priorities. A fence that needed mending, a barn roof that leaked, the endless demands of farm life. Now, that small neglect became my advantage. I pushed the window up slowly, wincing at every creak. The baby's crying had stopped, which worried me more than the sound had. Inside, I could hear Roberta's voice, sharp and agitated, speaking on the phone. "I don't care what he thinks, Mother Albright. This is happening. The farm should have been ours from the beginning." David was always weak when it came to Hannah. She played him like a violin. I froze halfway through the window. Of course, Mother Albright, her former mother-in-law. "Yes, I have the baby. No, she doesn't know yet. Amy's sedated at the hospital. By the time she wakes up fully, we'll have everything in place." A pause. "Stop worrying. Kenneth signed off on everything before he left for Singapore. He has no idea what he actually authorized." My hands gripped the window frame so hard my fingers went numb. Kenneth had signed something? Amy's husband? The man who loved her completely? Who'd been so excited about becoming a father? I pulled myself through the window, landing softly on the kitchen floor I'd mopped 1,000 times. The familiar layout of the house felt foreign now, transformed by Roberta's presence into enemy territory. I moved toward the study, where her voice continued. "The power of attorney gives me full legal authority over Amy's affairs. With the psychiatric report, we can have her committed for evaluation, 72 hours minimum. That's plenty of time to liquidate the property holdings and transfer the assets. Once the farm is sold, she'll be in no position to contest anything. She'll be a new mother with documented mental health issues fighting against family testimony." I reached the study doorway and peered around the corner. Roberta stood with her back to me, phone pressed to her ear, while my grandson lay in a makeshift bassinet on David's old desk, a cardboard box lined with blankets. The sight of him there, treated like cargo, sent rage flooding through my veins. "Listen to me," Roberta continued, her voice dropping lower. "David left Hannah that letter, the one about the cancer, about his final wishes. If she produces it, everything falls apart. We need to find it before she realizes its importance. It proves she knew about his mental decline. It proves she manipulated him when he was vulnerable." The letter. My hand instinctively went to my purse, where I'd carried that letter every day since David's death. His final words to me, written in the shaking handwriting of a dying man, expressing his love and explaining why he wanted Amy to have the farm. He'd been lucid, determined, and clear about his intentions. That letter was proof of his sound mind, proof that I hadn't manipulated him. Roberta thought it would condemn me. She had no idea it was my salvation. "I have to go," Roberta said abruptly. "Someone's at the door." But no one was at the door. She'd heard something. Maybe my movement, maybe just paranoia. She ended the call and turned. Our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Roberta's expression shifted from shock to calculation, her mind clearly working through scenarios, options, lies she could tell. "Hannah," she forced a smile. "What a surprise." "I was just taking my grandson?" I stepped into the room, forging psychiatric reports, plotting to steal my daughter's inheritance. Her smile vanished. "You don't understand the situation." "Oh, I understand perfectly. I heard everything, Roberta. The fake doctor, the manipulated power of attorney, your plan to have Amy committed. What I don't understand is how you could do this to your own niece. My niece who stole her grandfather's farm." Roberta's mask cracked, revealing the bitterness beneath. That property was supposed to be divided among all of David's relatives. Instead, Hannah the manipulator convinced him to leave everything to her precious Amy. Do you have any idea what that farm is worth? $3 million, at minimum. $3 million that should have been split fairly. David made his choice. The farm was his to give. He was dying, confused. You took advantage of— He was completely lucid, I interrupted, my voice steady. I have his letter, written in his own hand, explaining his reasoning. He wanted Amy to have the farm because she was the only one who truly cared about preserving it, about maintaining the family legacy, not selling it off for profit. Roberta's eyes narrowed. You're lying. There's no letter. I pulled it from my purse. 3 pages of David's careful script, dated 2 weeks before his death, notarized and witnessed. He knew someone would try to contest his will. He knew you, Roberta. He knew exactly who you were. She lunged for the letter. I'd anticipated it, stepping back quickly, but Roberta was desperate. Her hand caught my wrist, nails digging in. We struggled. 2 women in their 60s grappling over a piece of paper that represented a dead man's final wishes. The baby started crying again. The sound broke something in both of us. Roberta released me, breathing hard, her perfect hair disheveled. I clutched the letter, my wrist throbbing. You can't win this, Hannah, she said, but her voice wavered. I have documents, legal paperwork, Kenneth's signature. What exactly did you have Kenneth sign? Papers authorizing medical decisions for Amy and the baby. Standard procedure for overseas business trips. He thought he was being responsible. But that's not what the documents actually say, is it? Roberta's silence was answer enough. I walked to the desk and picked up my grandson, cradling him against my chest. His crying subsided into small hiccups. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice calm despite my racing heart. You're going to give me every document you forged, every piece of paper you tricked Amy or Kenneth into signing. Then you're going to drive back to the hospital and confess that you took the baby in a moment of confusion, a misunderstanding, family concern gone wrong. And if I refuse, then I call the police right now, show them this letter, and explain how you kidnapped a newborn as part of an elaborate scheme to steal his inheritance. Kidnapping, fraud, forgery. The charges will bury you, Roberta. She stared at me, calculating. Bradley won't let you destroy me. He agrees the estate should have been divided. Bradley is a lawyer. When he sees the evidence of what you've done, the forgery, the fake psychiatric report, the kidnapping, he'll run as far from you as possible. He's not going to risk his career for your vendetta. Roberta's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face went pale. What is it? I demanded. Kenneth. Her voice was barely a whisper. He landed early. He's at the hospital. He's looking for Amy and the baby. The situation had just become exponentially more complicated. Kenneth, the one person whose signature gave Roberta's documents any legitimacy, was about to discover his son was missing and his wife was sedated. Once he learned what had been done in his name, call him, I said. Tell him you have the baby, that you brought him to the farm because Amy needed rest. Tell him to come here. Why would I do that? Because when Kenneth arrives, you're going to admit what you've done. You're going to show him what you tricked him into signing, and you're going to hope that he's merciful enough not to press charges. Roberta's hands shook as she dialed. I listened to her stumbling explanation, heard Kenneth's confusion and growing anger through the phone's speaker. He was coming, and he was bringing Bradley with him. 20 minutes. That's all the time I had before this confrontation became a family crisis of catastrophic proportions. I used the time to search the study. Roberta had brought a briefcase, and inside I found the evidence of her scheme. The forged psychiatric evaluation from a Dr. Stempel who didn't exist. The power of attorney documents with language buried in legal jargon that gave Roberta far more authority than a standard medical proxy. Photocopies of Kenneth's passport and driver's license, bank statements for the farm account, and, most damning, a contract with a real estate developer dated 2 weeks ago, selling the Granger farm for $8 million, pending resolution of the estate. She'd already arranged the sale. Before the baby was even born, she'd found a buyer and negotiated terms. You were never going to wait for Amy to be declared unfit, I said, staring at the contract. You were going to force the sale immediately, then deal with the legal fallout later. By the time anyone could stop you, the money would be gone. Roberta sat in David's old chair, her facade completely shattered. The family deserved that money. David's siblings, his cousins, people who helped build that farm in the first place. It wasn't right for him to give it all to one person. David's siblings sold their shares of the family business 40 years ago. They took their money and left. David and his father kept the farm running, kept it in the family. That was his right. And you made sure Amy inherited it all. No, I said firmly. David made sure. I just supported his decision. The sound of tires on gravel announced Kenneth's arrival. Through the window, I watched him leap from Bradley's car before it fully stopped, his face twisted with fear and fury. Bradley followed more slowly, his lawyer's instincts already assessing the situation. They burst through the front door I'd unlocked. Kenneth saw me first, then the baby in my arms, then Roberta sitting defeated in the chair. What in the... He stopped, his eyes taking in the scene. Hannah, where's Amy? Why do you have my son? What's happening? Roberta took him from the hospital, I said quietly. She's been planning to steal Amy's inheritance. She tricked you into signing documents that weren't what you thought they were. Kenneth turned to Roberta, understanding dawning in his eyes. The papers you sent me in Singapore. The medical authorization forms. You said they were standard procedure. They were. Don't, Bradley interrupted, his voice sharp. He was staring at the papers spread across the desk, his face growing darker by the second. Don't say another word, Roberta. Not one more word. He looked at me. Hannah, please tell me you have proof of all this. I handed him the briefcase. As Bradley read through the documents, his professional composure cracked. Kenneth took his son from my arms, tears streaming down his face. And Roberta sat silent, watching her scheme collapse around her. You forged a psychiatric evaluation, Bradley said finally, his voice hollow. You created fake custody documents. You sold property you don't own. He looked at his aunt with something like horror. Roberta, this isn't just civil fraud. This is criminal. The family deserved, she began. The family deserves to be ashamed of you, Kenneth said, his voice breaking. My wife just gave birth. She's terrified. And you took our child, used my name, violated everything. His words choked off into sobs as he held his son. I watched them all. Kenneth grieving, Bradley processing, Roberta realizing the magnitude of her destruction, and I felt the weight of David's letter in my purse, the words he'd written with dying hands. Hannah, you've always been the strong one. Protect what matters. Protect our family. I'd done what he asked, but the cost was higher than I'd imagined. Bradley, I said quietly, call Amy. Tell her we're bringing her baby home. Bradley made the call, his voice carefully modulated as he spoke to Amy, but I could see his hands trembling. Kenneth sat on the old leather couch, cradling his son, whispering apologies the baby couldn't understand. Roberta remained in David's chair, staring at nothing, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt exhausted and wary. Something about this resolution felt too easy, too neat. Roberta wasn't the type to collapse without a final gambit. My instincts proved correct 15 minutes later when two vehicles pulled up outside, a police cruiser and a black sedan I didn't recognize. Did you call the police? I asked Bradley. He shook his head, confused. No. I told Amy we'd bring the baby ourselves, that everything was under control. Roberta's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and for just a moment, something flickered across her face. Not defeat, not resignation. Something closer to satisfaction. The front door opened without a knock. Two uniformed officers entered, followed by a woman in a severe gray suit carrying a thick folder. She had the bearing of someone accustomed to authority, her eyes taking in the scene with clinical precision. Mrs. Hannah Granger? She asked, looking directly at me. Yes. She produced identification. I'm Diane Foster, Child Protective Services. We received an emergency report regarding the welfare of a newborn infant currently in this residence. I'm here to conduct an immediate assessment. My stomach dropped. What report? Who called you? Ms. Foster consulted her folder. We received multiple calls starting at 8:47 this morning. The first was from a concerned family member reporting that an infant had been taken from St. Mary's Hospital by someone with a history of psychiatric instability and boundary violations. The second call came from the hospital itself, confirming the infant was missing. The third, she paused, her gaze settling on me with uncomfortable intensity, came from a lawyer representing family members concerned about the child's safety. "That's ridiculous," Kenneth said, standing up with his son. "I'm the baby's father. My mother-in-law has done nothing wrong. She rescued our son from the person who actually took him." "And who would that be?" Ms. Foster asked. Kenneth pointed at Roberta. "Her, my aunt by marriage. She kidnapped him from the hospital." Ms. Foster's expression didn't change. According to the hospital's security footage and sign-in records, Roberta Albright entered the maternity ward at 6:47 a.m., identifying herself as family. The footage shows her interacting with staff who had no concerns. Hannah Granger, on the other hand, never checked in at the reception desk. She was denied access to the maternity ward when she claimed to be the patient's mother, a claim the hospital staff found suspicious given that another woman was already registered as such. "Because Roberta lied about who she was," I protested. "Additionally," Ms. Foster continued, "we have documentation showing that you followed Mrs. Albright from the hospital, pursued her to this location, and entered the property through a window. Mrs. Albright has filed a report stating she felt threatened and feared for the child's safety." I stared at Roberta, understanding blooming cold in my chest. This was her contingency plan. She'd anticipated being caught, so she'd flipped the narrative. In her version, she was the concerned family member trying to protect a vulnerable newborn from an unstable grandmother. "That's insane," Bradley said, his lawyer's instincts fully engaged. "Roberta forged documents. She created a fake psychiatric evaluation. She has a contract to sell property she doesn't own. I have the evidence right here." He reached for the briefcase, but Ms. Foster held up a hand. "Sir, I'm not here to adjudicate property disputes or family conflicts. My sole concern is the immediate welfare of this child. And based on the reports I've received, there are serious questions about the current custody situation." "The current custody situation is that the baby's parents are his legal guardians," Kenneth said, his voice rising. "My wife is in the hospital. I'm right here. There's no custody question." Ms. Foster consulted her folder again. "Mr. Kenneth DeLeon, correct? According to the documents filed with us, you're currently subject to a temporary restraining order filed by your wife, Amy Granger, 3 days ago, citing domestic concerns and mental health issues." Kenneth's face went white. "What? That's impossible. Amy never filed anything. We're fine. The order was filed in family court Thursday afternoon. It requests that you maintain distance from both the mother and child pending a psychiatric evaluation." "Let me see that," Bradley demanded, taking the document from Ms. Foster's hands. His face darkened as he read. "This is forged. The signature isn't Amy's. The filing date is wrong. The case number doesn't match the county court's format." "Are you suggesting someone fabricated a legal restraining order?" Ms. Foster's skepticism was palpable. "Yes," Bradley said flatly. "That's exactly what I'm suggesting, and I can prove it." But even as he spoke, I saw the problem. Proving forgery would take time. Calls to the courthouse, verification of records, expert analysis. Time we didn't have. And Roberta had known that. One of the police officers stepped forward. "Ma'am, for the safety of the child, we're going to need to place him in temporary protective custody until these issues are resolved." "No." Kenneth held his son tighter. "You're not taking him anywhere." "Sir, please don't make this difficult." "Kenneth," I said quietly, though every instinct screamed to fight. "Let them do their jobs. Bradley will sort this out. We'll have him back within hours." "Hannah's right," Bradley said, though his jaw was clenched. "Resisting will only make this worse. I'll go straight to the courthouse, get emergency orders, and have this resolved before lunch." Kenneth looked at his son, tears streaming down his face, then slowly, painfully, handed the baby to Miss Foster. She took him with practiced efficiency, already moving toward the door. "Wait," I said. "Where are you taking him?" "He'll be placed in emergency foster care until the custody questions are resolved. You'll be notified of the proceedings." "Foster care?" Kenneth's voice cracked. He's less than 12 hours old. He needs his mother. She's still recovering from labor. You can't. But they could, and they did. Within minutes, my grandson was gone, placed in a stranger's car, driven away from his family because Roberta had poisoned the well so thoroughly that protecting him meant separating him from everyone who loved him. The police and CPS vehicles disappeared down the drive. The silence they left behind was suffocating. Roberta stood up, smoothing her blouse. I should go. I'm sure you all have a great deal to discuss. Sit down. Bradley's voice could have frozen fire. You're not going anywhere until we address what you've done. What I've done? Roberta's mask was back in place, her voice dripping false innocence. I tried to help. I was concerned about Amy's well-being. When I saw the baby in distress, I acted on instinct. If Hannah hadn't pursued me, hadn't broken into this house, hadn't created this entire dramatic situation. You filed a fake restraining order, Kenneth interrupted. You forged my wife's signature. You called CPS with lies. Prove it, Roberta said simply. Prove the restraining order is fake. Prove I called CPS. Prove any of your accusations. Because right now, all anyone can prove is that Hannah broke into this house and that there are serious questions about this family's ability to care for an infant. She was right, and we all knew it. She'd covered her tracks meticulously. The phone calls to CPS could have come from anywhere, probably from burner phones. The restraining order was so skillfully forged that proving it false would require court proceedings. And the hospital security footage would show exactly what she claimed, her entering properly while I lurked and pursued. The psychiatric evaluation, I said, grasping at straws. The doctor doesn't exist. That proves what? Roberta picked up her purse. That someone made an error? That paperwork got mixed up? I'm not a doctor, Hannah. If someone gave me a fraudulent document, I'm as much a victim as anyone. The real estate contract, Bradley said. You negotiated a sale of property you don't own. I negotiated nothing. A developer approached me asking about the property. I passed along information. If he drew up a preliminary contract in anticipation of future discussions, that's not illegal. Premature, perhaps, but not criminal. She'd thought of everything. Every document, every phone call, every piece of evidence had been structured to give her plausible deniability. And now my grandson was in foster care. Kenneth was implicated by a forged restraining order, and I was the grandmother who'd broken into a house and created a crisis. Roberta walked to the door, then paused. You know what the tragedy is, Hannah? David actually loved you. He trusted you. And you've twisted that love into this mess. You've turned this family against itself. You've cost Amy her child, at least temporarily, all because you couldn't accept that the farm should have been shared. Get out, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. After she left, the three of us stood in the wreckage of her schemes. Kenneth was shaking, his empty arms wrapped around himself. Bradley paced, his lawyer's mind clearly working through options, strategies, countermoves. We'll fix this, Bradley said, but he sounded uncertain. I'll go to the courthouse now. We'll get emergency orders. We'll expose the forgeries. She's going to keep going, I interrupted. This isn't over. Taking the baby was never the end game. It was just a move. She's after something bigger. The farm, Kenneth said bitterly. She wants the property sold. She wants Amy declared unfit so she can control the estate. It's more than that. I pulled out David's letter again, reading it with fresh eyes. There was something I'd missed, some detail that suddenly seemed crucial. David mentions his father's provisions, the original trust that established the farm. What about it? Bradley asked. He says the trust has a clause. If Amy is deemed incapable of managing the property, if she's legally declared unfit or unable to fulfill the trust's requirements, the farm doesn't go to the next of kin. It goes to auction, public sale, highest bidder. That's standard language for family trusts, Bradley said. It prevents incompetent heirs from destroying generational wealth. But if Amy is declared unfit, if the court determines she can't care for her child or manage her affairs, that clause triggers. The farm goes up for auction. And who do you think has already lined up a buyer willing to pay below market value for a quick sale? The implications settled over us like a shroud. Roberta wasn't just trying to steal Amy's inheritance. She was trying to trigger a legal mechanism that would force the farm's sale, and she'd already arranged for a buyer who would likely share the profits with her. "We need to warn Amy," Kenneth said, "before Roberta tries anything else." But when Bradley called the hospital, the news was worse than we'd imagined. Amy had checked herself out against medical advice. No one knew where she was, and when Kenneth called her cell phone, it went straight to voicemail. My daughter was out there somewhere, unaware that her son had been taken, that her family was fracturing, that her inheritance was under attack, and Roberta knew it. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered. "Hannah." It was Roberta's voice, smooth as poison. "I imagine you've discovered the trust clause by now. You always were thorough. I want you to know something. This isn't personal. It's just business. David should have divided the estate fairly. Since he didn't, I'm simply correcting his mistake. Where's Amy?" "Amy?" Roberta laughed. "I have no idea. But when she does surface, when she realizes her son is gone, when the stress and trauma of new motherhood combine with this crisis, well, she'll need support, psychiatric support. And I know several excellent doctors who'll be happy to evaluate her state of mind. Doctors who'll write very thorough, very convincing reports about her inability to care for a child or manage a valuable estate. You're threatening to have her committed? I'm offering to help her through a difficult time. The fact that her hospitalization might trigger certain legal provisions is merely unfortunate, but necessary. Goodbye, Hannah. I'll see you in court." The line went dead. I looked at Kenneth and Bradley, saw my own horror reflected in their faces. Roberta had escalated beyond theft, beyond manipulation. She was going to destroy Amy's life, piece by piece, until the farm was sold and the money divided. "We have to find Amy first," I said, "before Roberta does." But where would a traumatized new mother go when her world was collapsing? Where would my daughter hide when everything she'd built was being torn apart? And then I remembered. The one place Amy had always felt safe. The one place she'd go when the world became too much. The old barn at the far edge of the property. The place where David had taught her to ride. Where we'd spent summer afternoons. Where she'd carved her initials into the wooden beam 15 years ago. "I know where she is," I said, heading for the door. "Hannah, wait," Bradley started. "No time. If Roberta figures out where Amy's hiding, she'll have doctors there within the hour. She'll manufacture a crisis, call 911, have Amy involuntarily committed. We need to get there first." I ran for my car, my 63-year-old body protesting every step, but fear and determination pushed me forward. Behind me, I heard Kenneth and Bradley following, but I couldn't wait. My daughter needed me. My family needed me. And I was done playing defense. It was time to end this. The old barn stood at the property's edge, weathered gray wood that had witnessed 4 generations of Granger family history. As I pulled up, I saw Amy's car parked behind it, partially hidden by overgrown brush. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by renewed fear. If I'd found her this easily, Roberta could too. I approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. Through a gap in the barn's siding, I could see her sitting in the hayloft where she'd played as a child, her hospital gown still visible beneath the coat she'd thrown over it. She was staring at her phone, tears streaming down her face. "Amy," I called softly. She looked up and the devastation in her eyes nearly broke me. "Mom? What's happening?" "The hospital called. They said my baby is gone. They said," her voice fractured, "they said you took him, that there's some investigation, that I signed papers I don't remember signing. Nothing makes sense." I climbed the ladder to the loft, my knees protesting, and pulled my daughter into my arms. She collapsed against me, sobbing, and I held her the way I had when she was small and the world seemed too big and frightening. "Roberta took him," I said quietly. "She's been planning this for months. She wants the farm, and she's willing to destroy you to get it." "Aunt Roberta? But why would she?" "Because your father left the property to you instead of dividing it among the family. She's forged documents, created fake psychiatric reports, tricked Kenneth into signing papers he didn't understand. She's trying to have you declared unfit so she can trigger the trust clause and force a sale. Amy pulled back, searching my face. The trust clause. Dad explained it to me once. If I'm deemed incapable, the property goes to auction. And Roberta already has a buyer lined up. Below market value, but enough to split among the relatives she thinks deserve a share. Where's my baby now? I hesitated, knowing the answer would hurt. Child Protective Services took him. Roberta called them with false reports. He's in emergency foster care until we can resolve the custody questions. Amy's face went white. Foster care? He's not even a day old. He needs me. He needs... She stood abruptly, swaying. I have to get him back. I have to... Amy, stop. I caught her arm, steadying her. That's exactly what Roberta wants. She wants you to panic, to do something impulsive that makes you look unstable. She has doctors ready to evaluate you, to write reports supporting her narrative. If you show up at CPS or the police station in your current state, you'll be playing right into her hands. Then what do I do? The desperation in her voice was agonizing. You trust me. You stay here, stay hidden, and let me handle this. How can you handle this? She has documents. She has lawyers. She has lies, I said firmly. And I have the truth. More importantly, I have something she doesn't know about. Amy stared at me, confused. What? Your father and I anticipated this. Not the specific details, but the possibility that someone would try to contest his will, to claim he was manipulated or incompetent. We prepared for it. 3 months before David died, when the cancer had progressed but his mind was still sharp, he'd called a meeting with his lawyer, his doctor, and a court-appointed mental health professional. He'd recorded a video testimony explaining his wishes, his reasoning, and his absolute certainty that Amy should inherit the farm. He'd undergone psychiatric evaluation to prove his competency. He'd created a paper trail that would be nearly impossible to challenge. I'd kept all of it locked in a safety deposit box, waiting for the moment it would be needed. That moment had arrived. We need to go to the bank, I said. Get the documentation. Then we're calling a family meeting. A family meeting? Mom, Roberta isn't going to... Yes, she will. Because I'm going to tell her that if she doesn't come, I'm taking everything I have directly to the district attorney. Kidnapping, forgery, fraud, filing false reports. The charges will bury her. But I'm going to offer her one chance to walk away. You think she'll take it? No, I admitted. But I think she'll show up to see what cards I'm holding, and when she does, we'll finish this. Kenneth and Bradley arrived as we were climbing down from the loft. Kenneth rushed to Amy, pulling her into his arms, checking her over with frantic concern. Bradley, ever the lawyer, immediately started asking questions about the trust documentation, the video testimony, the psychiatric evaluations. Why didn't you mention these earlier? He demanded. Because I needed to understand the full scope of Roberta's plan first, I said. She's been careful to give herself plausible deniability at every turn. If I'd played my hand too soon, she would have adjusted her strategy. Now she's committed. She's made moves she can't take back. And she thinks she's won. What if she doesn't come to this meeting? Kenneth asked. Then we go to the authorities with everything we have. But she'll come. Her ego won't let her stay away. She needs to see me defeated. We spent the next 2 hours preparing. Bradley drafted legal documents. Kenneth called his company's attorney to file emergency motions. Amy, still weak from childbirth, rested in the barn while I drove to the bank and retrieved the safety deposit box contents. The video of David's testimony alone would be devastating to Roberta's claims. Watching it in the bank's private viewing room, I felt David's presence so strongly it hurt. His voice, thin but steady, explaining why he wanted Amy to have the farm, why he trusted her stewardship, why he knew others would contest his decision. Hannah will protect this decision, he said on the recording, looking directly at the camera. She's the strongest person I've ever known. Not loud, not aggressive, but absolutely unbreakable when it matters. If someone challenges this will, she'll know what to do. Tears blurred my vision, but I kept watching, memorizing every word, every gesture, every piece of evidence that proved David's sound mind and clear intentions. By 4 o'clock, we were ready. I called Roberta. "Hannah," she answered, her voice dripping false warmth. "I hope you've come to your senses about this situation. I want to meet. The farmhouse, 6 o'clock. Bring your lawyer if you want. This ends tonight." Bold words from someone whose daughter has lost custody of her child. 6 o'clock, Roberta. Be there, or I'm taking every piece of evidence I have to the district attorney first thing tomorrow morning. Silence on the line. Then, "What evidence?" "Come and find out." I hung up before she could respond. The farmhouse felt different as we prepared for the confrontation. Amy sat in David's chair, pale but determined. Kenneth stood behind her, protective. Bradley arranged documents on the desk with careful precision. And I stood at the window, watching the driveway, waiting. Roberta arrived at exactly 6 o'clock, punctual as always. She wasn't alone. The lawyer from earlier, Richard, accompanied her, along with 2 people I didn't recognize. A man in an expensive suit and a woman carrying a medical bag. "She brought a doctor," Amy whispered, fear creeping into her voice. "Let her try," I said calmly. They entered without knocking, Roberta's eyes sweeping the room, assessing positions, calculating odds. Her gaze lingered on Amy, and I saw the predatory satisfaction there. She thought this was over. She thought she'd won. "Hannah," Roberta said, settling into a chair as if she owned the place. "You said you wanted to end this. I'm here to listen to your surrender terms." "Surrender?" I pulled out a chair across from her, sitting with the deliberate calm of someone holding all the cards. "Is that what you think this is? What else could it be? Your daughter is unfit. Your grandson is in state custody. Your family is falling apart. I'm offering you a graceful exit. Amy can keep a small portion of the farm proceeds, say 20%. The rest gets divided among David's relatives as it should have been from the beginning. In exchange, we'll drop all the psychiatric concerns, help Amy get her child back, and move forward as a family." "That's generous," I said, my voice level. "Except for one small problem. Every document you've filed is fraudulent. Every claim you've made is a lie, and I can prove it." Roberta's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in her eyes. "Prove it? With what? David's letter? That just shows he was sick and vulnerable when he made his decisions." "Not just the letter." I nodded to Bradley, who began laying out documents on the desk. 3 months before David died, he underwent a complete psychiatric evaluation by Dr. Rebecca Morrison, a court-appointed forensic psychiatrist. She evaluated him over 3 sessions, conducted cognitive tests, and issued a 30-page report confirming his complete mental competency. Bradley placed the report in front of Roberta. Her lawyer, Richard, leaned in to read it, his face growing increasingly troubled. "He also recorded video testimony," I continued, explaining his wishes in detail, his reasoning for leaving the farm to Amy, and his anticipation that someone would try to contest his decision. "Would you like to watch it?" "Video testimony isn't legally," Roberta started. "It is when it's recorded with proper witnesses, notarized, and submitted to the county clerk's office as part of his estate planning," Bradley interrupted. "Which this was. I pulled the records this afternoon. Everything is properly documented. Furthermore," I said, "the psychiatric evaluation you created for Amy, the one from Dr. Harrison Stemple, that doctor doesn't exist. I had Bradley check with the state medical board. No one by that name is licensed in this state, or any neighboring state. You forged it." "I was given that report by no one," I interrupted, "because it's completely fabricated. The restraining order you filed in Kenneth's name? Also fake. The courthouse has no record of it. The case number doesn't exist. The judge whose signature appears on it hasn't worked in family court for 5 years. You forged that too." Roberta's face had gone rigid. "These are serious accusations. They're facts. And here's another one. The hospital security footage you're relying on? The footage that supposedly shows you properly checking in and me skulking around? I had Bradley subpoena it. The full footage shows you bribing a security guard to alter the visitor log, shows you using a fake ID with the name Roberta Granger, and shows you explicitly telling the guard that you were about to fix a family problem. That guard has agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. This was a bluff. We hadn't actually subpoenaed the full footage yet, and we had no idea if there was a bribed guard. But Roberta's face told me everything I needed to know. There was a guard. She had bribed someone, and now she knew we'd find the evidence. The real estate contract you negotiated, Kenneth added, pulling out his phone. I contacted the developer this afternoon. Funny thing, he was under the impression that Amy had already agreed to sell, that the family had already signed off, and that the only thing delaying the transaction was some minor paperwork. He was very interested to learn that none of that was true. He's withdrawn his offer and is considering legal action for fraud. The woman with the medical bag, Roberta's doctor, stood up. I don't know what's happening here, but I'm not part of any fraud. Mrs. Albright, you told me this was a legitimate psychiatric evaluation. It is, Roberta said, but her voice had lost its confidence. No, Amy said quietly, speaking for the first time. She stood, still weak but radiating dignity. It isn't. I've never had psychiatric issues. I've never threatened myself or my child. Everything my aunt has told you is a lie designed to steal my inheritance. The doctor looked at Roberta with disgust, gathered her things, and walked out. Richard, the lawyer, was already packing his briefcase. You're on your own, Roberta, he said coldly. I don't represent clients who involve me in criminal activity. Expect a bill for my time and don't expect me to return your calls. He left too, leaving Roberta alone with her conspiracy collapsing around her. You can't prove any of this, she said, but it sounded hollow. I can prove all of it, I said quietly. Every forgery, every lie, every manipulation. And I will, unless you agree to my terms. Your terms? You drop every claim against Amy. You sign a legal document acknowledging that you took my grandson from the hospital without authorization. You agree to testify that all the documents you filed were based on mistaken information. You help us get custody back. And then you leave this family alone. Forever. And if I refuse, then I press charges. Kidnapping, fraud, forgery, filing false police reports, conspiracy. You'll spend the next decade in prison, Roberta. Your reputation will be destroyed. Your family will abandon you. You'll lose everything. She stared at me, hatred burning in her eyes. You've always been cunning, Hannah. I underestimated you. You mistook kindness for weakness, I said. David made the same mistake once. He learned better. You should have too. For a long moment, Roberta said nothing. Then, slowly, she reached for her purse. For a heartbeat, I tensed, uncertain what she might pull out. But it was just a pen. Where do I sign? She asked, her voice bitter. Bradley produced the documents. Roberta signed them, each stroke of the pen like a surrender. When she finished, she stood, her perfect posture finally cracking. This isn't over, she said quietly. Family doesn't forget. Family doesn't forgive what you've done either, Amy replied. Don't come back, Aunt Roberta. Don't call. Don't write. You're not welcome here anymore. Roberta walked to the door, paused, then left without another word. Through the window, I watched her drive away, her taillights disappearing down the drive into the gathering dusk. The silence that followed felt sacred, like the moment after a storm when the world holds its breath before beginning to heal. Is it really over? Amy asked, her voice small. The legal part is, Bradley said. I'll file these documents first thing tomorrow. We'll get emergency orders reversing the CPS custody. You'll have your son back by tomorrow afternoon. Kenneth pulled Amy close, both of them crying now, relief and exhaustion overwhelming them. I stood at the window, watching darkness fall over the farm, and thought of David's words on that video. She's the strongest person I've ever known. He'd been wrong about that. I wasn't the strongest. I was just the most determined to protect what mattered. And in the end, that had been enough. The morning sun broke over the Granger farm with the kind of golden light that makes everything look hopeful, like the world is offering a fresh start. I stood on the porch with my coffee, watching Kenneth's car turn onto the gravel drive. In the back seat, secured in the car seat that should have been there yesterday, was my grandson, finally coming home. 24 hours. That's how long it had taken Bradley to navigate the legal maze Roberta had created. 24 hours of emergency filings, expedited hearings, and testimony from the security guard who, faced with the prospect of criminal charges, had confirmed everything we'd suspected. He'd admitted Roberta had paid him $500 to alter the visitor log and look the other way while she left through the side exit with the baby. Amy emerged from the farmhouse, moving carefully, still recovering from childbirth. Her eyes were fixed on that car with an intensity that made my chest ache. When Kenneth stopped and opened the back door, when he lifted that tiny bundle wrapped in blue, Amy's legs nearly gave out. I steadied her, then stepped back, letting her take her son into her arms. The sound she made, somewhere between a laugh and a sob, was the sound of something broken being made whole again. "Hey, little one," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Mama's here. Mama's got you." Kenneth wrapped his arms around both of them, creating a small circle of family that had been fractured, but now was healing. Bradley stood beside his car, watching with an expression I'd never seen on his lawyer's face before. Something soft, almost vulnerable. "Coffee?" I offered, knowing he'd been up all night working. "Please," he said, following me into the kitchen. "Hannah, I owe you an apology." I poured 2 cups, raising an eyebrow. "For what?" "For doubting you. For siding with Roberta about the estate. For assuming that Dad must have been manipulated because I couldn't imagine why else he'd leave everything to Amy instead of dividing it." He accepted the coffee, staring into it. "I was jealous. Amy's your daughter, his daughter, and she got everything. I'm the son from his first marriage and I got nothing. That felt personal." "It wasn't personal, Bradley. Your father loved you. I know that now." After watching that video testimony, hearing him explain his reasoning, he wasn't cutting me out. He was protecting something he believed in. The farm, the legacy, the idea that some things are worth more than their market value. Bradley set down his cup. He was right about Amy. She would have preserved it, protected it. Roberta would have sold it the first chance she got. We all would have lost something irreplaceable, I agreed. But I still don't understand why he didn't just explain it to me before he died. Why all the secrecy? I'd asked myself the same question in the months after David's death. Now, having lived through Roberta's schemes, I understood. Because he knew someone would try to contest his decision. He knew that if he talked about it openly, if he tried to justify or explain, it would look like he was uncertain, like he could be swayed. The secrecy wasn't about trust. It was about protection. Bradley nodded slowly. He was protecting Amy from what just happened. He knew Roberta would try something. He didn't know the specifics, but he understood the people involved. He understood his family better than any of us realized. Amy came inside, carrying her son, Kenneth hovering beside her with the watchful concern of a new father. The baby was asleep, his tiny face peaceful, unaware of the chaos he'd been born into. "How do you feel?" I asked my daughter. "Terrified," she admitted. "Exhausted. Grateful. Angry. All of it at once." She looked down at her son. "Mom, what if Roberta tries again? What if she finds another way to—" "She won't," Bradley interrupted firmly. "The documents she signed yesterday aren't just admissions. They're legally binding. If she violates any of the terms, if she makes any move against you or this property, she faces immediate prosecution. I've also filed for a permanent restraining order. She can't come within 500 feet of you, the baby, or the farm." "But family gatherings," Amy said. "Holidays. What do we—" "We make new traditions," I said quietly. Roberta made her choice. She chose greed over family. We don't owe her access to our lives. Kenneth sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where David and I had shared thousands of meals. "There's something we need to discuss. The farm. Amy's inheritance." Amy tensed. "Kenneth, we've talked about this. I'm not selling." "I know. I don't want you to sell." He took her free hand. "But Roberta was right about one thing. This property is worth millions. The taxes alone are going to be substantial. We need to figure out how to maintain it, how to make it sustainable, or we'll end up losing it anyway. There's the timber, Bradley said thoughtfully. The North 40 acres has mature hardwood. Selective harvesting could generate income without destroying the forest. And the southern fields, I added. They're being leased to neighboring farms for soybeans, but the lease terms are terrible. David signed them when he was sick and didn't have the energy to negotiate. We could renegotiate, probably double the income. Amy looked between us, surprise dawning on her face. You're all helping? We're family, Bradley said simply. Real family helps each other succeed. They don't tear each other down for profit. Over the next hour, we sketched out a plan. Bradley would handle the legal restructuring, creating a family trust that would protect the property while generating sustainable income. Kenneth would use his business background to modernize the farm's operations and explore eco-tourism possibilities. City people paid good money to experience farm life. I would manage the day-to-day operations, at least until Amy recovered and was ready to take over. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what David had originally envisioned. But it was real, practical, and built on cooperation rather than conflict. What about Roberta's share of Dad's personal assets? Bradley asked. The estate settlement gave her 20% of his liquid assets. She's legally entitled to that. Let her have it, Amy said. I don't want to fight about money. She wanted cash, she'll get cash. But the farm stays in the family. That's non-negotiable. Bradley made notes. I'll draw up the final documents. Once everything's signed, Roberta will have no legal grounds to challenge anything. This will be done. The word hung in the air like a promise. Done. Finished. Over. But even as we talked logistics and legal structures, I kept thinking about what Roberta had said before she left. This isn't over. Family doesn't forget. She was right about that. Family doesn't forget. But what we choose to remember, what we choose to hold on to, defines us. I could hold on to the betrayal, the fear, the moment I watched Roberta drive away with my grandson. Or I could hold on to the moment when Kenneth called to say the baby was being released, when Amy held her son for the first time in 24 hours, when Bradley admitted his jealousy and chose reconciliation over resentment. Later that afternoon, after Bradley left and Kenneth convinced Amy to rest, I walked the property alone. The fields stretched toward the horizon, the same fields David's grandfather had plowed with a team of horses nearly a century ago. The barn where Amy had hidden stood weathered but solid, still protecting secrets and dreams. The farmhouse, with its creaking floors and perpetually loose window, held memories of laughter and arguments, births and deaths, all the messy complexity of family life. Roberta had seen all of this and thought only of its market value, $3 million. Maybe more, with the right buyer. Money that could be divided, spent, forgotten. She'd never understood what David knew, what his father had known, what I was beginning to truly grasp. Some legacies can't be measured in dollars. Some inheritances are written in soil and sweat, in the choice to preserve rather than liquidate, to build rather than divide. My phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me click accept. Mrs. Granger? A woman's voice, professional but warm. This is Janet Reeves from the County Historical Society. I understand your property includes some of the original Granger homestead structures. Yes, I said carefully, uncertain where this was going. We're working on documenting the agricultural history of the region, and the Granger farm is one of the oldest continuously operated family farms in the county. Would you be interested in having the property evaluated for historical designation? There are some significant tax benefits, and it would help preserve the structures for future generations. I looked at the farmhouse, the barn, the fields that had sustained 4 generations. Yes, I said. I'd be very interested in that. We talked for 20 minutes. The historical designation would provide tax relief, grant opportunities for restoration, and legal protections against certain types of development. It would also create restrictions on how the property could be used or sold, effectively preventing anyone from ever liquidating it for quick profit. David would have loved that irony. Roberta's scheme to force a sale would have triggered the trust clause, but now, With historical designation, the property couldn't be sold to just anyone. It would have to go to a buyer committed to preservation, likely for far less money than Roberta had imagined. Her greed had pushed us toward a solution that made the farm more secure than it had ever been. When I returned to the farmhouse, I found Amy sitting on the porch, her son nursing contentedly. Kenneth dozed in the chair beside her, exhausted from 2 sleepless nights. The evening light cast everything in warm amber tones. "Mom?" Amy said softly, not wanting to wake Kenneth or disturb the baby. "Sit with me?" I settled into David's old rocking chair, the one he'd occupied for 35 years of summer evenings. It creaked in familiar rhythms. "I've been thinking about Aunt Roberta," Amy said. "About what she said. That you manipulated Dad, that you convinced him to leave everything to me. And? She was partly right. You did influence his decision, but not through manipulation, through example." Amy shifted the baby to her shoulder, patting his back gently. "Dad saw how you managed the farm when he was sick, how you kept things running, made smart decisions, never complained about the work. He saw how I learned from you, how I wanted to be like you. That's why he left the farm to me. Not because you manipulated him, but because you showed him what real stewardship looks like." My throat tightened with emotion. "Your father made his own choices, but you made them possible. You gave him the confidence to trust me with this legacy, and now you're teaching me how to carry it forward." She looked at her son, then at me. "I want to name him David, David Kenneth, after his grandfather and father, the men who showed him what family means. Your father would be honored. And I want you to stay here, on the farm. Help me learn how to do this right. I know you have your own life, your own plans, but—" "Amy," I interrupted gently, "I have no plans more important than this, than you, and Kenneth, and little David. This farm is my home. It has been for 35 years. I'm not going anywhere." She smiled, tears catching the fading light. "Thank you. For everything. For protecting us. For knowing what to do when I was falling apart. That's what mothers do," I said simply. "We protect. We remember. We carry the wisdom forward." We sat in comfortable silence as the sun set over the Granger farm. 3 generations gathered in peace, the 4th sleeping innocently in his mother's arms. Somewhere out there, Roberta was nursing her defeat, perhaps already plotting some new angle, some way to salvage her pride, if not her scheme. Let her plot. Let her scheme. She'd already lost the only battle that mattered. The farmhouse stood solid behind us, its windows glowing with warm light. The field stretched toward the darkening horizon, ready for another season, another generation. The barn held its secrets and memories, patient and enduring. This was the real inheritance, not the property value or the bank accounts, but the knowledge that some things are worth fighting for, worth preserving, worth passing on. The understanding that family isn't about blood alone. It's about who stands beside you when the world tries to tear everything apart. Roberta had brought all her weapons, forged documents, false testimonies, legal manipulations, and cold calculation. She'd thought age meant weakness, that kindness meant cowardice, that silence meant ignorance. She'd learned otherwise, not through violence or shouting, not through matching her manipulations with my own, but through patience, preparation, and the quiet strength that comes from knowing your cause is just. David had been right in that video testimony. I wasn't the loudest person in any room. I wasn't the most aggressive or the most imposing. But when it mattered, when my family needed protection, I was absolutely unbreakable. The baby stirred in Amy's arms, making small sounds of contentment. Kenneth woke up, immediately reaching to check on his son. Amy handed little David to him, and I watched 3 generations of men named David or carrying his legacy, my husband's memory in the sleeping infant, the protective father, the farm that would bear witness to this new life growing up. "We should go inside," Kenneth said. "Getting cold." "You two go ahead," I said. "I'll be there in a minute." They went inside, leaving me alone with the night. Stars began appearing. The same stars David and I had watched from this porch for decades. The same stars his father had watched before him. "We did it, David," I whispered to the darkness. just like you knew we would. The farm is safe. Amy is safe. Our grandson is home. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of turned earth and growing things. Not an answer exactly, but an acknowledgement. A reminder that some conversations don't need words, that some promises outlive the people who make them. I stood, my 63-year-old bones protesting slightly but still strong, still capable. Inside, my family waited, complicated, imperfect, but genuinely trying to build something better than what came before. That was enough. That was everything. I walked into the farmhouse, into the light and warmth and messy beauty of family life, and closed the door on Roberta's darkness behind me. The Granger legacy would continue, and I would be there to make sure it did. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.